Tonight on the Worldview Report, the world's largest asset management company is advising its clients to dump the dollar. The Boy Scouts of America is changing its name for the first time in 114 years of its history. And this once great American institution seems to have its priorities all out of whack. The radical America-hating Congresswoman Ilhan Omar is facing a censure in the House of Representatives after she once again proves just how much she hates, Jewish supporters of the Jewish state. 41% of American voters believe a second civil war could afflict the United States. Of these voters, 16% believe such a scenario is very likely. The city of Denver, Colorado is encouraging residents with extra room to host illegal aliens in their homes. What could possibly go wrong? And why is Joe Biden dodging the media? All these reports and more as the Worldview Report begins right now.
This is Worldview Report with host Brannon Howse. Whether it is news from the nation's capital or your state capital, from the classroom to the boardroom, from national security to national and local news that impacts you and your family, Worldview Report is your trusted source for vital and uncensored news. And now, here is Brannon Howse.
Good evening and welcome to the Worldview Report. The investment management company BlackRock has issued a major warning about the U.S. dollar. The company, which is the world's largest asset management firm, is warning investors sitting on large amounts of cash to start moving some of it into bonds and other investments. According to BlackRock, the bond market has seen some volatility amid the uncertainty around interest rates and the Federal Reserve's monetary policy. On Friday, the 10-year Treasury yield, briefly fell below 4.5%. The drop came following a weak jobs report for April and a surprise tick higher in unemployment rates. Steve Ipley, co-author of BlackRock's paper, wrote the following, quote, "It's time to start migrating back to fixed income, especially with yields at these levels," end quote. With the Fed still working in an uncertain area, the market is nearly impossible to time correctly. So stocks, they're not advisable. That's what he said. According to the financial website Watcher.guru, the BlackRock investment managers, they're advising using bonds to protect U.S. dollars. Quote, "It is a very compelling opportunity for investors to get their fixed income side of the portfolio right-sized," end quote. That's what the report said. Furthermore, BlackRock recommends using a bond fund or an ETF. The company says investors should use a holistic approach, which can include a mix of both to get diversified exposure cheaper for their assets. The U.S. dollar has had a, very chaotic 2024, to say the least, in part due to BRICS and their intervention. Remember, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. They're adding in Saudi Arabia and now Iran and others. And that bloc, they are actively looking to ditch the U.S. dollar and influence other countries to do the same. With the latest warning by BlackRock to secure your U.S. dollars another way, it's clear that the alliance's mission is succeeding. Inflation and interest rate hikes, they only further help to destabilize the dollar. The Boy Scouts of America is changing its name for the first time in its 114-year history, and it will become simply known as Scouting America. It's a significant shift as the organization emerges from bankruptcy following a flood of sexual abuse claims, and it seeks to go even more woke, focusing on what it calls diversity and inclusion. ABC News reports that the organization that is steeped in tradition has made, quote, "seismic changes after decades of turmoil, from finally allowing gay youth to welcoming girls throughout its ranks," end quote. Finally allowing gay youth, huh? Why do youth need to be thinking about sexuality at all while participating in scouting activities? Can you answer that one? This is the real reason, folks, why the Boy Scouts have fallen dramatically from more than 5 million members in 1972 when the U.S. population was much smaller, by the way, to just now 1 million. The Boy Scouts, well, they're no longer catering to boys, clearly, or scouting, but they're catering to things like skin color, gender, and sexuality. They have clearly become a pathetic shadow of their former selves, and this, of course, sets the stage for them to be infiltrated by, I think, sexual predators and others. But instead of cleaning up their act, what does the Boy Scouts do? They change their name to be more inclusive of what has already caused their demise. This is what you call Romans 1 fools. Vain, useless, and futile in their thinking. The organization began allowing gay youth in 2013, and they ended their blanket ban on gay adult leaders in 2015. In 2017, it made the historic announcement that girls would be accepted as Cub Scouts as of 2018. And they'd be accepted into the flagship Boy Scouts program that's renamed Scouts BSA in 2019. And where's it gotten them? And they're just going to double down and go even further to the land of crazy, the land of wokeness, transgender, inclusivity, whatever you want to call it. There were nearly 1,000 young women in the inaugural class, by the way, of female Eagle Scouts in 2021. The ABC News report, well, it cited the case study of Selby Chipman, who was a founding member of her hometown of Oak Ridge, North Carolina chapter, which has grown from 5 girls to nearly 50. And she thinks the name change, well, it will encourage even more girls to realize they can join the Boy Scouts. This is almost laughable, but it's not funny. If it wasn't so sad, it would truly be comical. How a once great organization, well, can frankly implode and then double down on the very thing that caused it to explode. But no one ever accused the foolish of being other than that. Vain, useless, and futile in their thinking. Slay News reports that the radical, America-hating Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, Democrat from Minnesota, is facing a censure resolution after she referred to Jewish students who are not anti-Israel as pro-genocide. Omar made the remarks during a recent visit to Columbia University in New York City. In response, Congressman Don Bacon, he's a Republican from Nebraska, announced he is introducing the resolution against Omar. This was on Tuesday. The New York City Ivy League school has been the flashpoint for nationwide demonstrations on college campuses, as we all know. And students, of course, they have set up tent encampments, supposedly to protest their university's financial ties to pro-Israel companies. Last month, Omar's daughter was one of more than 100 Columbia students and young adults attending the sister school, Bernard College, who were arrested over their encampment. The Marxist so-called squad member visited the demonstration on April 26 in what was supposed to be a show of solidarity for the pro-Hamas protesters. Omar, well, she told Fox 5 New York during her visit, quote, "I actually met a lot of Jewish students who are in the encampment, and I think it is really unfortunate that people don't care about the fact that all Jewish kids should be kept safe. We should not have to tolerate anti-Semitism or bigotry for all Jewish students, whether they are pro-genocide or anti-genocide," end quote. Bacon's resolution, the text of it, says that Omar's slanderous comments against Jewish students could inflame violence against the Jewish community. The congressman's resolution also accuses Omar of having, quote, "a long and demonstrated history of hateful rhetoric that plays into the worst anti-Semitic tropes," end quote. A new Rasmussen poll has found that 41% of American voters believe a second civil war could afflict the United States. Of these voters, 16% believe such a scenario is very likely. 49% believe that it is not likely that a civil war will take place in the U.S., while 10% are unsure. The poll also found that Republican voters were more certain that the U.S. would be in a state of civil war than their Democratic counterparts. 54% of Republican voters, 35% of Democrat voters, and 32% of independent voters believe it is at least somewhat likely that the U.S. will go through a second civil war at some point in the next 5 years. The poll also found that 37% of voters believed a Biden victory would make a civil war more likely, whereas 25% believed a Trump victory would send the country into civil war. With respect to race, 39% of white voters, 46% of black voters, and 51% of Hispanic voters believe a second civil war is at least somewhat likely to occur in the next 5 years. When it comes to money makers, those making over $200,000 annually, they are the least likely to believe America is headed toward a second civil war. Denver, Colorado, like communities across the nation, well, it's collapsing under the weight of its growing population of illegal aliens, all thanks, of course, to Joe Biden's broken border. Denver's mayor just cut police funding by $8 million to keep catering to illegals. Different advocacy groups, they say that 6 months of free housing and food, well, that's not enough. And it's insulting to the illegals. A new push is encouraging people with so-called extra room to host illegal aliens in their homes. They have even set up a so-called helpful hotline to expedite the process. It's a nonprofit group called Hope Has No Borders, and it's working to pair illegals with host families across Colorado. And of course, this can now be expedited via a new hotline. Just pick up the phone. KDVR reports, quote, now with help from the United Way. Getting paired up is a simple phone call away by dialing 211, end quote. Watch this video.
Now, if you're interested in learning more about hosting a migrant family, all you got to do is take out your phone, dial 211. It's as easy as that. You're going to be asked a few questions, things along the lines of how long are you able to host somebody, what kind of space are you available to provide, and Kettering says you can expect that phone call to last about 20 minutes. Reporting live in Denver, Nate Pelt, Fox 31.
So all it takes is a 20-minute phone call, and you can be signed up to host a migrant family. Now, you just watch all these leftist, woke, Marxianity pastors. Yeah, I said Marxianity for new people. That's a book I wrote in 2018 where I combined the word Marxism and Christianity, and I wrote a book called Marxianity. You wait and you watch. There are going to be a lot of Marxianity pastors in these Protestant so-called evangelical churches saying how Jesus would want you to open your home to migrant families. Well, to me, this sounds like a situation that could be, well, set up so children are exploited by predators and maybe even human traffickers. And no doubt, it's already happening. It's already happening. We better be aware. We'll be right back after this break.
Sounds rolling. All 3 cameras. We're good.
Is there any regrets that you have in life? I should sit here and say, yeah, I got a lot of regrets. But when I look back on my life and I understand the lives that were lost, I mean, I'm sitting here with you. And I can tell my story.
Former National Security Advisor, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, pleaded guilty today to lying to the FBI.
He was one of the most respected generals in the military.
He was, by definition, the most dangerous possible person for Donald Trump to hire.
Brilliant military career, serving 33 years.
Why was he being so elusive?
Mike Flynn told the truth and faced life in prison.
Welcome back from the break. Thank you for joining us tonight and every night. And thank you for your continued support of WVWFoundation.com. Our foundation exists for many reasons, but primarily to produce news, information, programming, books, documentaries, and conferences, literature, to help people understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview. If you appreciate that fact, we appreciate your support as we push out this program in part as a public education and ministry broadcast of WVWFoundation.com. You see, the foundation helps to underwrite some of the cost of pushing this out because the bandwidth bill is huge that we pay, and we could put all of this behind a paywall immediately and say, no, you got to pay to see it. But no, we push it out because the foundation comes along as a sponsor and says, give it out there as programming for ministry and education. So if you appreciate that, we need your support at the foundation. WVWFoundation.com. WVWFoundation.com. You'll also find our mailing address there if you prefer to support us through the mail. Don't forget, it's our foundation that is the very host and sponsor of our Sunday night church service, 8 p.m. Central Time each Sunday night since 2015 at worldviewtube.com. Right now I'm teaching through the book of Revelation. Now we're going to take off for Sunday because that's Mother's Day, but you can watch all of the 6 broadcasts that I've done thus far teaching through the book of Revelation. Last Sunday was lesson number 6. You'll find it at worldviewtube.com. Worldviewtube.com. Hope you'll check it out. Again, that's our Sunday night church service, 8 p.m. Central Time, Sunday nights, worldviewtube.com. And it is the church service of our foundation, WVWFoundation.com. Thank you for your support. Again, WVWFoundation.com. The Israeli military took control Tuesday of the Gaza Strip side of the Rafah border crossing with Egypt. It's a sign that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is indeed moving ahead with his plan to launch a full offensive on Rafah. Israel moving a tank brigade to the edge of the southern Gaza City, well, it came amid ceasefire negotiations with Hamas. The Palestinian terrorist organization said Monday it had accepted an Egyptian Qatar-mediated ceasefire proposal. But Israel said it didn't meet its core demands and they rejected it. That's according to CBS News. Israel, well, they now say it has taken, quote, operational control, end quote, of the Rafah crossing, which is a primary route for aid entering the besieged enclave. And it's also the exit for those able to flee into Egypt. That's what the news outlet also reported. Just the News reports that Cuba has spent years training some of the anti-Israel protest organizers behind the recent demonstrations on college campuses. That's according to a new investigation that shows that the communist country's close ties to the U.S. progressive movement is indeed just that, very close. One of the most prominent activists, Monolo de los Santos, first visited Cuba as early as 2009. And he has been featured prominently in Cuban state-owned media since at least 2016. ADN American reported this fact on Tuesday following an extensive investigation by that outlet. Just the News briefly spoke with De Los Santos, the founder of the People's Forum, which is a self-described New York City-based, quote, movement incubator, end quote. They spoke while he attended a, quote, Gaza Solidarity Encampment, end quote, protest earlier this month at Fordham's University, and that's the Lincoln Center campus. While De Los Santos said he has never visited the region of Palestine, he has been at protests across the city, including Columbia University and City College, in order to support the students in their protest against Israel. De Los Santos has a very long history of collaboration with top Cuban officials, according to reports, including Cuban president himself, Díaz-Canel. For example, last year, De Los Santos posted on X, formerly known as Twitter, as we all know, that he spent 10 days in Cuba, quote, learning with its people and its president, end quote. He said the young people in the U.S., quote, have a responsibility to defeat once and for all this genocidal blockade, end quote, of Cuba. The term blockade is, well, used by critics to refer to the U.S. trade embargo on that island nation. The day of the October 7th, 2023 Hamas attack that resulted in the deaths of about 1,200 people in Israel, and of course the kidnapping of 250 others, De Los Santos made multiple posts on X celebrating the attacks. His organization also, according to reports, organized a demonstration in Times Square on October 8th, where attendees, they voiced their support for the attack, which was, of course, the largest massacre of Jews in a single day since the Holocaust. De Los Santos was also, quote, based out of Cuba for many years, end quote. That's according to his biography that was featured when he spoke at an event in 2021 for the Black Alliance for Peace. That's an anti-Israel, pro-Cuba organization. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology more commonly known as MIT, has taken a significant step by eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, statements from its faculty hiring process. Fox News reported that the decision, confirmed on Sunday, marks MIT as the first among elite institutions to make such a move. A spokesperson for the university confirmed to Unheard that MIT has decided to remove the requirement for prospective faculty members to submit a DEI statement during the hiring process. The spokesperson further clarified to Fox that this decision, spearheaded by MIT's president, Sally Kornbluth, has garnered support from the provost, chancellor, and all 6 academic deans. Kornbluth emphasized the institution's commitment to tapping into the full breadth of human talent and attracting the very best to MIT. CBS News reports that an Atlas V rocket carrying astronauts for the first time was fueled for blastoff Monday night to boost Boeing's long-delayed Starliner crew ferry ship into orbit for its first piloted test flight. But trouble with a valve in the rocket's upper stage forced the mission and its managers to order a scrub just 2 hours before takeoff. It was a frustrating disappointment for Commander Barry Wilmore and co-pilot Sonita Williams, who were in the process of strapping in for launch when the scrub was announced. The moment brought to mind one of Wilmore's favorite sayings, quote, "You'd rather be on the ground wishing you were in space than in space and wishing you were on the ground," end quote. And with Boeing's track record of late, I think that's, well, true by a magnitude of 10. NASA said in a blog post earlier Tuesday that the launch will be delayed until at least Friday night and possibly Sunday or maybe later next week. Well, now it's time for our nightly Worldview Report commentary. Is Joe Biden dodging the media? Even the corporate mainstream media is growing impatient with Biden's avoidance of interviews, and he has given the fewest of any president in more than 40 years. According to a report by Just the News, some corporate-owned reporters, they have speculated that Biden is hiding from them in order to hide his old age and failing memory. In the wake of a Politico story about tension between the New York Times and the Biden administration, the newspaper released a statement criticizing Biden for avoiding media interviews. The statement published by the New York Times said, quote, "For anyone who understands the role of the free press in a democracy, it should be troubling that President Biden has so actively and effectively avoided questions from independent journalists during his term," end quote. The paper added that, quote, "Biden has granted far fewer press conferences and sit-down interviews with independent journalists than virtually all of his predecessors," end quote. It is humorous that the Times considers itself independent when, in fact, it is the poster child, I think, of, well, the New York corporate elitist establishment that works hand in hand with the CIA to propagandize us, the American people. And, of course, they help to protect the CIA, and they're also promoted by the CIA. One hand washing another, I guess. But according to the Times, their concerns is, quote, that systematically avoiding interviews and questions from major news organizations doesn't just undermine an important norm, it also establishes a dangerous precedent that future presidents can use to avoid scrutiny and accountability. That is why the publisher, Solberger, has repeatedly urged the White House to have the president sit down with the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, Reuters, CNN, and other major independent news organizations that millions of Americans rely on to understand their government, end quote. Well, it's exactly because Americans rely on what I think are corrupted government-approved news outlets like them that the American people remain largely ignorant of what's really going on in their country and around the world, for that matter. And note that the Times, their statement, makes it clear that they are not worried about Biden avoiding the media, only that he is setting a, quote, dangerous precedent, end quote, that other presidents could replicate. The Times, they endorsed Biden's presidency in 2020, and they have not endorsed a Republican presidential candidate since 1956, when it then endorsed Dwight Eisenhower. So enough said about that, right? And by the way, if they're so concerned about independent news agencies having access to the president, why would they not encourage Biden to sit down with us? We are extremely independent. We are not funded by George Soros. We're not funded by the government like PBS. We're not funded by Big Pharma. We are about as independent as you can get. So here's my invitation to the White House. We would gladly interview President Joe Biden. And guess what? He doesn't even have to leave his home in Delaware or the White House to do it. We'll just Skype right in and do the interview. And if they want to do it live in real time, so it can't be edited, we'll grant that as well. So, Mr. Biden, you're welcome to come right here to WorldViewTube and Patriot.tv, and I promise I will respect you as I do all my guests, because that's what a professional does. And I also respect the presidency and the office that you sit in. So I think you'd be shocked at how respectful I would be, but I will ask tough questions, but I will be respectful. And you're welcome anytime. You just have your folks call me. We'll set that up, and perhaps the most independent news agency and organization in America will gladly interview you. So there you go. Don't hold your breath, folks. Do not hold your breath. Well, that does it for this edition of the Worldview Report. Till next time, thank you for tuning in. And remember, you make this possible by going to, MelissaHouseBG.com. That's one website you can go to. MelissaHouseBG.com. Find out about the elixir that Melissa and I each take every day. It's called Bella Grace. Collagen, cat's claw, that's an anti-inflammatory, and something called astaxanthin, loaded with antioxidants. Oh, I can't say enough good about this. It's got about 80 clinical trials behind it, folks. 80 clinical trials. You can read them for yourself at MelissaHouseBG.com. Also a great way to support your health, I think, and us. Go to Neumi.com/house1. Neumi, Neumi.com/house1. Be sure to spell house, HOWSE. Neumi.com/house1. This is loaded with what's called glutathione. Glutathione is a powerful molecule that detoxes your cells. You don't have to take my word for it, folks. There's lots of studies on that. And then finally, why not check out this? This is the wellness company medical emergency kit. 8 meds in here, 8 different medications in here. You want to have at least one of these on hand for every family member should there be a disruption in just-in-time inventory or the power grid. 8 meds. If you want to know what the 8 meds are and what they treat, just go to twc.health/Brannon. And when you use that URL, you not only save money, you're also supporting this broadcast. So twc.health/Brannon. All right, check it out. Thank you. Great way to support us and yourself at the same time. Well, till next time, I'm Brannon Howse. May God save America. Take care.